Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, and thanks for taking a few minutes out of your day or morning to watch the video. Much appreciated. And actually it's about midnight here. I'm doing tonight's tip for tomorrow, so you'll see this in the daytime. In fact, I'm doing it late at night here, trying to get it done when I can. And today we're going to be talking about something that is one of my favorite ways to catch them in the summertime, and that's on a squarebill crankbait. And specifically, I'm going to go in today about how to choose between a balsa squarebill crankbait and a plastic model. You know, when you should use it, different situations, because there's times that one works a lot better than others. And one of the things I'm trying to do, guys, is I'm trying to do these tips sort of like where you can apply them to your fishing right now. I know so many guys on YouTube that do tips. They do something like how to flip a jig, you know, something real generic. And I'm trying to give you guys some stuff that you can take to the water right now and use it. And the summertime is, in my opinion, when these squarebill crankbaits excel. You can catch them on it, you know, most of the year, anytime the water temperature is over 50 degrees. But this is the time of year, my favorite time to fish it. So anyway, just a real quick reminder before you get into it, a couple housekeeping tips. I think you guys know that I'm offering memberships on the channel here. So if you guys would like to help support the channel and go a little bit further, you can go into the About section and click on Intuitive Memberships. Sort of shows you what we got going on. It's stuff like, you know, additional videos that are available, that are not available to the public, that I do every week. Access to my own personal email address for your own personal fishing questions. So it's just a good way to support the channel if you're interested in doing that. So much appreciated. Okay, let's talk a little bit. Specifically, I'm going to talk about my two favorite, and that's the Megabass S-Crank, which I think is the best plastic squarebill crankbait on the market, and the Balsa crank. This is actually a homemade version made by David Ryan, a buddy of mine that hand carves these things. But you know, a lot of different companies will make these. I think Bagley was one of the original producers of them. Zoom used to make one, but this is a custom made one that I use from David Ryan that I've done really good on. So these are basically my two choices for that. So question is when do you want to use plastic over balsa? And I think a lot of people sort of oversimplify it. They basically say, well, okay, you need to use balsa when you're fishing around wood because it's more buoyant. If you get hung up, it's going to float up to the surface, and you know, plastic doesn't float up as much. I don't really buy that as far as, you know, something to determine when I use, you know, the balsa versus the plastic. It's not really quite applicable to me. There's a lot of other variables that have to do with it. One of the things that you realize about this is the crankbaits, the squarebills, come in a lot of different sizes. So these are the bigger sizes. This is actually the 3 series on the balsa, and this is the S-Crank 2.0. These are the largest versions here. So one of the factors that you consider is the size that you use, because a lot of times the size has to do with a combination of water clarity, the size of fish that you're fishing for. You know, some lakes are known to have better quality fish in it. Some lakes are tougher, where you downsize. And a lot of it has to do too with the depth of the water. One of the things that you're going to find out in squarebill fishing, and this is the first thing I want to talk about, is when you determine to use a balsa or a squarebill, a balsa or a plastic bait, is you have to ask yourself the depth of the water that you're fishing. So we'll start out on one end of the spectrum for summertime fishing and go to the other end. On one end of the spectrum, we have the shallowest, dirtiest water you're going to have, and on the other end, we have what is considered the upper end for the water clarity and the depth of fishing in. So for me, a squarebill comes into play when that water visibility is over 8 inches in clarity. That I consider 8 inches clarity like pretty much the max on the dirtiness that I like it. And I'll consider the maximum depth on it maybe 3 feet or so. Actually, probably more like 2.5 feet. So let's go with 8 inches to 2.5 feet. That's the first consideration that I make when I'm choosing balsa versus plastic. In general, as a general rule of thumb, what I like to do is the shallower the water and the dirtier the water, the more that I'm going to the balsa and the more that I'm going to a smaller size balsa. This is a 3 here. So I would go to, let's see if I got my cranks here. Actually, hold on, I do have them right here. I probably should prepare for this a little bit better, but I didn't prepare for this one too good. So anyway, here's the number 3 size right here. And I've got a, well, I'll go to the 2. Here's like a 2. You can see the difference in them. And then the one's even smaller like that. And it's the same with the S crank. You know, you've got 3 different sizes. So the dirtier and the shallower the water that I'm fishing, that's when I go to the Balsa crankbait, and that's when I go to the smaller size. The reason I like the Balsa a little bit more is since that water is super, super shallow, I can control the speed on it a little bit more because of the buoyancy. So say for example, if I want to burn it next to like a laydown in a 1.5 foot of water, I've got that option to stop and go that bait and let it float up faster, or faster than a plastic one would. So when you're fishing water that's really dirty and really hot, a lot of times you have to generate that reaction strike from it. And the reaction strike comes a lot of times with how fast and how hard that bait deflects off of objects, or how fast it floats up. Because say for example, if I'm cranking this Balsa crankbait next to a laydown in a 1.5 foot of water that's 12 inches visibility, if I stop it, it's going to come up like that. It's going to rise real fast. And that's a lot of times, if I crank this thing, you know, down next to laydown, stop it, it floats up like that. A lot of times we'll get it on the rise like that. And I trigger a lot of fish in that shallow, dirty water around any type of wood cover. I'm not really concerned about, you know, bouncing it. I try to get it as close as I can. I try to deflect off the wood, but that's not the primary factor, because a lot of times I'll reel these Balsa cranks next to the cover, not coming through them. But what I want is the ability for that bait to rise extremely quick to generate that strike in warm water. Now the plastic on the other hand is a little bit different, because when I'm using the plastic, this is when I'm more concerned about the depths that bait's getting to. Whereas I'll use the Balsa crankbaits in the cover that's really flat and shallow, that doesn't have much break or drop on it. The times that I use the plastic, you know, square bills like this, like the S crank, is when I'm cranking banks that have a little bit of an angle or drop to it. Riprap banks, rocky banks, maybe some 45-degree angle banks that have some laydowns off the end of it. You know, places like that this bait needs to get down a little bit further, because for whatever reason, it has to do with the construction of the bait, or the action of the bait, or, you know, the rise or fall of the bait, and how much water it pushes. I just get a lot more bites on banks that have an angle of like a 45-degree angle slope with the Squarebill crankbait. So again, I try to get the baits as close as I can to the targets. I try to bounce off them a little bit, but I'm not judging which one I throw based upon its ability to efficiently come through that cover. Because for me, I don't notice any difference. I can, if I go up to a laydown and I throw this through a laydown, I can get this bait, either one of these baits, to go through the laydown the same way. Once you develop a feel for these baits, you get a feel for how these baits crawl across objects, and you can either speed the bait up or slow it down, or shake the rod tip and get the bait to sort of walk over it. I mean, a lot of times, you know, when this bait's coming down or a laydown and it hits a laydown, you feel it hit it, and a lot of times you can just shake the rod tip like that and it'll just go up a little bit like that and come back down. So as you become more skilled as a crankbait angler, you'll be able to get a feel for not getting that bait hung up. And a lot of the times when you do get it hung up, it's usually in some type of a crook in the limb, or you come across the limb that is just the perfect angle as far as to catch the gap of the hook right there. But for the most part, they're pretty weedless with that. So back to the question, it's like, when do you choose you know, balsa over plastic on there? To me, just to reiterate, it has to do with the angle of the bank that you're fishing more than anything else. I use these baits in the same water clarities a lot of times. You know, it's like, I'm not using the balsa like just in dirty water, and I'm not using, you know, the plastic just in like the little bit cleaner water. I've caught fish on these S cranks in, like I said, 6 inches of visibility, and I've caught them in 6 feet of visibility. Same with the Squarebills right now. Both of them, they got similar actions a little bit. The S crank, has a little bit tighter action than the custom-made David Ryan model. This is a little bit wider action like this. Every Squarebill crankbait has a little bit different wobble on the thing. But the things that generate strikes on Squarebill crankbaits, it's a combination of the wiggle and the profile of the bait. And there's so many good ones out there. I mean, there's a bunch of different good ones out there, and sometimes they prefer a certain profile and a certain wobble over another. I mean, just as you can see with this one right here, I mean, you can see the two different profiles with them as far as the, you know, the width across the backs and everything. And those little subtle differences like that make a big difference in generating a strike. And a lot of times you don't really know. It has to do with the personality of the fish, the mood that they're in, time of day. There's a lot of different factors that go into it. But anyway, just to get back to the tip and everything, to, you know, what we're starting out is like when you ask yourself, okay, what do I need to do? Do I need to choose a balsa crankbait, or do I need to use a plastic when it comes to the summertime? Again, just let the cover and the bank angle determine it. If you're on banks that are flat, that have a lot of horizontal cover on it, that don't have a lot of drop or angles to it, you know, stick with the balsa crankbait. And if you've got something that's got a little bit of an angle, a little bit of a slope to it, you know, that's when, you know, I go to the plastics a little bit. That's probably something you've never heard before, but that's what works for me. That's the things and the situations that I've had the best success on. Another thing on there I'll just, you know, leave you guys with again, and like I said, this, we can go into a lot of different details on it, but you know, you can't overlook the size on the thing. There's a lot of variables on it. It's not only the size, it's the color of the crankbait they're using, it's the type of retrieve that you're using, it's the line, it's all that type of stuff. And we'll go into that at a later point. But anyway, that's my guidelines for balsa versus plastic. I don't use, like I said, I don't use balsa because it comes through cover easier and it's easier to get, you know, unhung. That's not what my choice is. It's what I was telling you about the angle of the bank. So anyway, give it a try. I think it'll help you guys catch a few more fish this summer. Like I said, you should have, there's time to have both in them. I've seen times that they just eat a balsa crankbait and times that they don't, you know, want the balsa crankbait, they want the plastic. One thing I would tell you a little bit, guys, when that water is at the hottest part of the summer, which is usually in August, last part of July, first part of August, once that water peaks at the highest point, that's when the balsa crankbait shines more than anything else. And I think it has to do with how fast that bait rises next to cover. And then once that water temperature starts to go down a little bit, not a whole lot, but just when it starts on its way down, you know, like towards the end of August, September, that's when I go back to the plastic a little bit, and I don't use the balsa near as much. So just a few tips, hope it helps you guys out. So thanks for tuning in. We'll be back later. See you.